The email subject line froze Nathan Cross in place. Subject, immediate contract termination, final notice. From Jordan Fields, COO, TruePath AI. He blinked twice, then 3 more times. Was this a joke? Jordan, his former protege, sending a final termination notice to him? Nathan had sold TruePath AI 8 months ago. The $5 million acquisition had secured his future. But a clause in the merger allowed him to retain advisory rights and a residual equity stake until Q4. And now someone was trying to erase him from his own legacy, on paper, in email. Nathan tapped the screen. Due to multiple absentee quarters and conflicting advisory practices, your remaining privileges and access have been revoked, effective immediately. Kindly return all active hardware. Your keycard has been disabled. He didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He simply whispered, "Jordan, what the hell are you doing?" By the time Nathan pulled into the gravel driveway of the Cross family estate, the California sun had started bleeding into orange. The house stood tall, unyielding, with its white pillars and bay windows like silent witnesses to too many secrets. He wasn't here to deal with corporate treachery, at least not yet. Today was supposed to be about Margaret Cross, his mother, her 60th birthday, a woman who still baked oatmeal cookies like it was 1996 and hummed to Ella Fitzgerald while planting lavender in her backyard. But the real reason he hated returning here was Richard Cross, his father, a once glorified real estate mogul now reduced to snide remarks, financial manipulation, and an ego too big to contain in one lifetime. Nathan stepped out of his matte black Tesla, adjusted the collar of his forest green shirt, his mother's favorite color, and looked toward the front porch. She was already there. "Nathan," Margaret beamed, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Her scent, lavender and cinnamon, wrapped around him like a blanket. "You look just like your grandfather today." Hopefully with fewer regrets, he muttered, half smiling. They walked around to the backyard where soft jazz floated through stringed lanterns, and a modest crowd mingled beneath the dusk sky. Nathan kept his eyes moving, searching corners without looking like he was searching. And there he was. Richard Cross stood near the bar cart, glass in hand, gaze as sharp as a scalpel. His silver hair was slicked back, suit crisp as ever. And that smile, the kind that never reached his eyes, sliced through the warm atmosphere. Nathan turned his back quickly, joining his cousin Talia and Aunt Rachel in light banter, but the back of his neck prickled. That gaze hadn't moved. Minutes later, a voice like oil on marble. "Nathan!" He turned. Richard was behind him, holding a glass of dark red wine, nearly black under the lantern light. "A special pour," his father said, smiling faintly. "For my son. On your mother's big day." Nathan hesitated. Something about Richard's tone made his skin crawl. The glass shimmered in the light. "Don't worry," Richard added. "I wouldn't poison my own son." He chuckled, sipped his own wine, and handed Nathan the glass with a firm grip. That phrase. Why did it feel more like a disclaimer than a joke? Nathan smiled tightly and accepted it. "To Margaret," he said, raising the glass. They clinked. He took a sip, barely half a mouthful. Rich, bitter, slightly metallic. He forced a smile. "I'll go say hi to Aunt Susan," Nathan muttered, placing the glass on the bar and walking away quickly. He only made it 10 steps before the ground shifted. His vision blurred. The world moved like a carousel, voices warping and echoing. Jazz notes slowed into distortion. He tried to speak. "Mom?" But his legs buckled. He collapsed. When he awoke, it was to the rhythmic creaking of a ceiling fan and the faint scent of lavender. "Nathan!" Margaret's voice cracked. She sat beside the bed, gripping his hand. "Where?" His throat burned. "Your old room," she whispered. "You fainted in the garden. Richard said you drank too much. But I know you. You didn't." Nathan closed his eyes. The glass, the bitterness, his father's expression. "I only had one sip," he rasped. Margaret's eyes shimmered. "Your father insisted you downed 2 glasses. Said you were slurring, but I saw you. I watched you." They sat in silence. The ceiling fan spun. The silence screamed louder than words. Finally, Margaret said, "You know, when my father passed, it was after a dinner with Richard. Just the 2 of them. He was healthy. But he collapsed the next morning. Doctors said heart failure. I never believed it." Nathan looked at her. "You think?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I never wanted to believe Richard was capable of anything like that." "But you do now," Nathan finished for her. Slowly, methodically. Margaret stood and crossed to the window, her figure framed by moonlight. "He always insisted on serving drinks himself. Always had a special pour for guests. I used to think it was charm. Now," Nathan rose from the bed, every muscle stiff. "I need to know the truth, Mom. For me, for Grandpa, maybe even for you." She turned, eyes wide, lip trembling. "Be careful, Nathan. If he really did something—" "I won't accuse," Nathan said calmly. "Not yet. But I'm not letting him gaslight me into thinking I passed out from 1 sip." Outside, the lanterns were still glowing, dim now like dying stars. Inside, Nathan's rage began to burn. Later that night, as he stood in front of the mirror, Nathan pulled out his phone and reread the termination email from Jordan. First his company, now his life? The pattern wasn't coincidence. It was a campaign. And Richard Cross had just made one mistake. He left Nathan breathing. "If you've ever been dismissed or ignored after giving your all, type 1. Nathan Cross stared at the screen in disbelief. "Unauthorized transfer notice, $482,000 USD, executed. Initiated by Jordan Fields, Executive Access." His jaw clenched. That money was never part of the equity transfer. It had been sitting in a frozen trust account, protected under the final clause of the TruePath merger, restricted until year's end unless authorized by him or a 2-party board vote. Except he had never approved this, and no board vote had occurred. Nathan refreshed the audit trail. Timestamp, Friday, 7:14 p.m. Exactly the same time he had collapsed in the garden from Richard's special glass of wine. For a full minute, Nathan didn't move. Not his fingers, not his breath. Because that's when it clicked. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was strategic, coordinated. Someone had used his near-death moment to rob him blind. While he lay unconscious, someone else, someone he once trusted, had capitalized on it. And the person who served that wine was his own father. Thanksgiving came wrapped in sharp wind and even sharper silence. Margaret called him twice that morning, voice soft with worry. "Please come, Nathan. Just one evening. For me." He didn't have the heart to say no. She deserved more than abandonment. So, at 5:12 p.m., Nathan pulled into the same driveway, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of his Tesla like a warning shot. Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey, sage, and vanilla. It was almost warm enough to forget everything. Almost. Margaret greeted him at the door, wrapping him in another lavender-scented hug. "You look tired, sweetheart." "Sleep's been complicated," he replied, stepping inside. In the dining room, Richard Cross sat confidently at the head of the table, glass of red wine already in hand. His suit was flawless, his silver watch glinting under the chandelier like a surgeon's scalpel. "Well, well," Richard smirked. "The prodigal son returns. Feeling better after that little spell in the garden?" Nathan didn't reply. He sat across from Richard, facing him directly this time. The table buzzed with idle chatter. Aunt Susan passed mashed potatoes. Uncle Paul uncorked a second bottle of Merlot. But Nathan's eyes never left the man who once held his childhood hostage. Then it happened. Richard stood, raised his glass, and said, "To family and second chances." He leaned forward, grabbed an untouched glass from the tray, filled it with a generous pour, and handed it directly to Nathan. "This one," Richard said, his voice velvety smooth, "is extra special." Nathan's skin went cold. There it was again, the same phrasing, the same glass, the same setup. He took it without blinking, but this time he was ready. As he reached for his napkin, he accidentally dropped it, dipping low beneath the table. In that split second, under the hum of background conversation, he swapped the wine glasses, his with Richard's. By the time he sat up, the switch was done. Richard raised his glass. "Cheers, son." They clinked. Nathan didn't drink, but Richard did, a full sip. Then he turned back to Aunt Susan, laughing as if nothing had happened. Nathan watched and waited. 10 minutes. Nothing. 20. Still nothing. Nathan's heart beat so loudly it nearly drowned out the music. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe it was just a bad bottle that first night. Maybe. 45 minutes in, Richard Cross paused mid-sentence. His hand moved to his chest. He blinked, coughed. His glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Richard," Margaret gasped, rushing to him. He stood, staggered one step, then collapsed, just like Nathan had days earlier. Chaos erupted. Aunt Susan screamed. Uncle Paul called 911. Margaret knelt beside her husband, tears in her eyes. Nathan stood silently, unmoving, staring at the glass shards reflecting the chandelier like tiny bloodstains. The paramedics arrived in minutes. They strapped Richard onto a stretcher, oxygen mask over his face. He was breathing, barely. Nathan leaned close to his mother. "I need the glass he drank from." Margaret stared at him in horror. "Please," he said. "I'll explain. Just help me." She hesitated, then nodded, wiping her tears. "Go, it's still in the kitchen sink." He found it, fractured, but not completely shattered. The stem intact. Inside, a few drops of deep red remained. He collected it in a vial from his car's emergency kit and slipped it into his pocket. That night, he didn't sleep. He placed the vial beside him on the nightstand. A quiet grenade waiting to be detonated. The next morning, he drove to a private forensic lab in Fremont, known for handling high-profile corporate cases discreetly. The technician, a woman named Samantha Blake, examined the sample. "What are you hoping to find?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Anything that proves what I already suspect." She nodded. 3 days. 3 days. It felt like waiting to find out if your house had been wired with explosives. Back home, Margaret called with updates. "He's stable. They say it was a cardiac episode, but they don't know why it happened." Nathan didn't respond. Not yet. He couldn't. Not until the truth was undeniable. 3 days later, Samantha called. "Mr. Cross," she said, voice flat. "You should come in." Nathan drove like a man possessed. Samantha met him in the lab, handed him the report. One line was bolded. "Barbiturate, high concentration detected." She looked at him gently. That dose was enough to cause unconsciousness, or death depending on body mass. Nathan closed his eyes. So it was true. Richard had tried to kill him, and if the switch hadn't happened, he'd be the one in the hospital. Or worse. He stood, folding the report, slipping it into his coat. "Thank you. Don't tell anyone I was here." "I won't," Samantha said softly. "But whatever this is, I hope you're safe." As Nathan stepped into the cold dusk, one thought echoed in his head. The glass didn't shatter, but this family might. That night, Nathan printed 2 copies of the lab report. One he sealed in a fireproof envelope. The other he tucked in his coat pocket. Because next time he saw Richard Cross awake, there would be no more toasts, only truth. If you believe some betrayals only get exposed when the tables turn, type 2. The file was gone. Nathan sat at his desk, stunned, watching the spinning error icon on his screen. Access denied. Archive request error 403. Authorization revoked. He tried again, inputting the secure passcode linked to his retained advisory credentials. Still locked out. His private folder, containing signed merger agreements, legacy financial records, and copies of Richard's involvement in estate transitions, had vanished from TruePath's encrypted servers. He called legal. "The archive has been restructured, Mr. Cross," the assistant said flatly. "All legacy permissions have been sunset. But that folder had critical IP tied to the founder agreement. I'm afraid you no longer hold founder access. Mr. Fields finalized a full revocation last Friday." Nathan's chest tightened. Friday. The same day Richard handed him a glass of poisoned wine. The same day Jordan Fields, his ex-COO, silently wiped Nathan's name from his own company's digital history. The betrayal wasn't layered anymore. It was coordinated, and if they were erasing his presence from the servers, then what else had they rewritten? "Mom," Nathan said that evening, pacing in the hallway, "I need to get into Dad's old study." Margaret hesitated at the kitchen counter, halfway through slicing an apple. "Nathan, he always kept that room locked." "Then we find the key." "I haven't been in there in over 10 years, she said. "He never let me touch his paperwork, said I'd mess things up." "Then maybe that's exactly where the truth is." She stared at him, then reached for the ceramic cookie jar on the top shelf, lifting the lid to reveal an old brass key. "Third drawer from the bottom," she whispered. "Right side of the desk. That's where he kept anything sensitive." Nathan took the key like it was made of glass. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing the past. Dust lay heavy on dark wood. Framed newspaper clippings of Richard's real estate triumphs lined the wall, yellowed with age. A cold steel safe crouched behind a half-curtained shelf. Margaret stood in the doorway, arms folded tightly. "Try our wedding date, April 3rd. Click. The safe opened. Inside, 2 thick binders, a sealed envelope, a stack of deeds, and a worn leather-bound notebook. "What's that?" Margaret whispered, stepping closer. Nathan flipped it open, handwriting old, scrawled, heavy. He flipped to the back. His mother gasped. "That's my father's handwriting." The notebook trembled in Nathan's hand. The final pages were raw, rushed, fragmented. "Something's not right with Richard. Felt dizzy after dinner, wine tasted off. If I don't wake up, someone must investigate." Margaret covered her mouth, backing into the wall. No. "He left this here," Nathan said, "intentionally or not. This is testimony." Tears streamed down Margaret's cheeks. "I thought I imagined it. When he died so suddenly. They said heart failure. But he was healthy, Nathan. Strong. Still hiked every Sunday." Nathan placed the notebook on the desk and looked at her. "You weren't wrong. And now we're not alone with this anymore." Later that night, Nathan called Mr. Harris, a private investigator he'd worked with during the early TruePath days. "Richard Cross," Nathan said flatly. "I believe he killed his father-in-law. I also believe he attempted to poison me. I have a lab report and I have a journal from the victim." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "I want to see everything." 3 days later, Harris met them in Nathan's apartment. Journal laid out on the coffee table, lab report beside it. Margaret sat rigid in a chair, clutching a tea mug with both hands. "The journal helps," Harris said, "but if you want real closure and real legal ground, you need confirmation." "You want to exhume the body," Nathan said. "It's invasive, yes, but if the same compound, barbiturate, is found in your grandfather's remains, we're not just talking speculation. We're talking a murder trail stretching back decades." Margaret's lip trembled. "He deserves the truth. My father deserves to rest in peace." Harris nodded. I'll initiate a private request for court approval. We'll need a medical examiner and a forensic toxicologist. Nathan placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. We're doing this together. 2 weeks later, the grave was opened. The process was solemn, quiet, rain threatening overhead. The examiner worked quickly. Samples were taken under tight protocol, chain of custody documented. Nathan signed everything. Margaret cried silently beside him, holding a faded photograph of her father smiling in front of their old bakery in Napa Valley. When the toxicology report returned, it hit like a brick wall. Positive. Barbiturate. Trace concentration consistent with deliberate exposure. Nathan exhaled, staring at the words. Not a heart attack. Not coincidence. Murder. I want him in court, Margaret said the next day, fire back in her eyes. Not just for you, for my father. For every year I spent sleeping beside a man who lied. Nathan nodded, sliding a file across the table. Inside, the lab result from his own poisoning. The forensic toxicology from the exhumation. The handwritten journal, forged estate documents uncovered by Harris, including signature mismatches from Richard's alleged witness on the will. A paper trail linking those estate funds into the same shell accounts now co-managed by Jordan Fields. This isn't just family betrayal anymore, Nathan said. It's legacy laundering, fraud, abuse of power. We can destroy him. Margaret looked up at her son, tears in her eyes. No, she whispered. We don't destroy him. We expose him. Nathan emailed Anna Flores, a criminal attorney specializing in inheritance fraud. The subject line was simple. Case, Cross vs. Cross, ready to proceed. At the same moment, Richard Cross sat in his hospital suite, unaware of what was coming, flipping channels on the TV, sipping a glass of water. He didn't know that justice was no longer a concept. It had a time, a date, and a courtroom. Type 3 if you think silence enables monsters to thrive behind closed doors. The subpoena dropped into Nathan Cross's inbox like a thunderclap. Subject, case file. 519C, Cross v. Cross. Final witness call sheet. From Anna Flores, Esco. You've been formally listed as a key witness for both attempted murder and historical estate fraud. See attached schedule. Trial begins Monday. He stared at the file. The name on the docket was unmistakable. Defendant, Richard Alistair Cross. Charges, attempted homicide, first-degree murder, will forgery, estate theft. His father, the man who had once taught him how to ride a bike, who had, with the same hands, stirred poison into his wine glass, twice. Nathan didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. That Monday, the courthouse in Marin County buzzed with reporters, attorneys, and murmurs of the real estate mogul who fell from grace. The case had leaked, of course. The media loved a fallen patriarch, especially when betrayal was wrapped in a silk tie and poured from a vintage wine bottle. Inside, Nathan sat beside Margaret in the front row, fingers laced tight. She wore a navy dress, no jewelry, just clarity. Richard entered, guarded by 2 deputies. He looked thinner now, older. His eyes darted to his son, then away. No smirk, no nod. Just a man unraveling. Anna Flores began with surgical precision. She laid out the timeline, the coincidental garden collapse during Margaret's birthday. The second collapse, Richard's at Thanksgiving after a secretly switched wine glass. The lab report, the barbiturate dosage. The exhumed autopsy confirming the same poison killed Margaret's father 30 years earlier. The forged estate documents, the signature mismatches, and the shell accounts tied to Jordan Fields. Each slide on the monitor was a nail in the coffin. Richard's defense tried to argue coincidence, stress, a genetic heart defect. But their momentum faltered when Nathan took the stand. Anna approached calmly. Mr. Cross, can you describe what happened the night of Thanksgiving? Nathan leaned into the mic. I was handed a glass of red wine by my father. He called it special. It was the same phrasing he used days earlier, When I collapsed in the garden. This time, I swapped glasses. 45 minutes later, he collapsed. The wine I saved was tested. It contained barbiturate, enough to stop a heart. Gasps whispered across the room. Anna turned to the judge. No further questions. The defense attorney fumbled with her notepad. Mr. Cross, isn't it true you dislike your father? Nathan didn't blink. I feared my father. There's a difference. Then Margaret took the stand. She spoke with quiet conviction. For over 30 years, I doubted myself. I let silence live in our house. But after I saw what Richard did to our son, and after I found my father's journal, I knew. I'd been married to a man who poisoned my father to steal his inheritance, then tried to do the same to his own child. Her voice cracked. I won't stay silent anymore. Nathan closed his eyes. That statement, simple but powerful, meant more than any data point ever could. The prosecution rested. The courtroom went still. Richard was offered a final chance to speak. He stood. No theatrics, just a gray suit, a slow gait to the stand, and a hollow look. I made mistakes, he said quietly. But I never meant to kill my son. I only needed to get out of a hole. I was desperate. I didn't know another way. The courtroom remained silent. You had every other way, the judge finally said. You chose poison. The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty count 1, attempted murder. Count 2, first-degree murder. Count 3, fraudulent transfer of assets. Count 4, forgery of legal documents. Sentencing. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Richard didn't react. He just stared ahead, motionless, as though the words had already been written in his bones long ago. Outside, the press surged. Cameras flashed. Microphones swarmed. Nathan shielded Margaret with one arm and raised a hand. No comments today, he said. We're not here for attention. We're here for accountability. They left the courthouse, not triumphant, but free. Weeks passed. The old Cross estate was sold. Margaret moved into a smaller house in Sausalito, closer to Nathan's apartment with a view of the bay. She planted lavender again, hummed quietly, found peace in small things. Nathan visited every weekend. They played chess, cooked together, talked about nothing, talked about everything. And one evening, over steaming mugs of tea, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever feel whole again?" Nathan stared out the window. Sunset cut the sky in half. No, he said honestly, but we can feel clean. One night, Nathan received a letter, handwritten, no return address, just one sentence. The wine never lied. I just poured it wrong. R.C. He folded it once, dropped it into the fire. No more toasts, no more ghosts. Nathan looked across the garden, where the lavender danced in the wind, and whispered, I don't need revenge anymore. I have truth, and that's the one thing he can never take back. If you believe justice isn't revenge, it's remembering who we protect, Type 4.